Alzheimer's disease is an incurable disease that causes loss of memory, judgment, and ability to function. Alzheimer's disease usually affects people older than the age of 65 and can have a disheartening impact on families and friends of the patient. Gene mutations often cause Alzheimer's disease and are passed down from parent to child, making it an autosomal dominant inheritance. This familial Alzheimer's disease particularly affects the APP, PSEN1, or PSEN2 genes. When they are altered in any way, shape, or form, amyloid plaques can occur, which can result in the development of Alzheimer's disease. For late-onset Alzheimer's disease, which is the main focus of our SNP chip project, the gene APOE is suspected to be directly related to the development. Particularly, the E4 alleles of this gene seem to be the most directly involved. It is uncertain what the inheritance pattern is, whether it is autosomal dominant or recessive, due to the fact that late-onset Alzheimer's is not inherited from a parent. Alzheimer's disease affects more than 5 million Americans, and genetics can have around 70 to 80% of a contribution towards the development of Alzheimer's, and around 30% of the environment can contribute towards the development.
Those worried about developing Alzheimer's disease can have a genetic test done to see if they are at risk. One of the most popular genetic testing sites, 23andMe, tests for increased risk by focusing exclusively on the epsilon 4 variant in the APOE gene. This gene is located on chromosome 19 and codes for the construction of a protein known as apolipoprotein E. This protein is responsible for the formation of lipoproteins, and these lipoproteins can be found all throughout the body in our bloodstreams and are mainly responsible for transporting lipids to cells and various organs. Their main function in the brain is to regulate neurobehavioral function by transporting lipids and cholesterol to neurons. These transported lipids and cholesterols are used by the receiving neurons as components for membrane structure, signaling molecules, and other functions. According to medlineplus.gov, the exact way the epsilon 4 variant affects the APOE gene is not known, but research has shown that the allele is associated with an increased buildup of amyloid plaques in the brain. These plaques are protein clumps that build up between neurons, which interrupt neuron function and can even lead to neuron death. This buildup can lead to increased signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease.
Our tests for genetic variations on the APOE, APP, PSEN1, PSEN2, and ABCA7 gene. These genetic variations were found to have a direct link with an increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. One of the variations I'll be discussing in particular is the RS3752246 variant, which I'll just be referring to as the RS375 variant from now on, is not tested by 23andMe. RS375 is a relatively modestly valued predictive variant compared to other high-impact variants found within the ABCA7 gene. According to authors at the National Library of Medicine, the ABCA7 gene is mostly responsible for lipid transportation and membrane repair within the neurons. Variation RS375 is then responsible for the impairment and prevention of this function from happening, which then results in the pathology of Alzheimer's. What type of protein, though, is altered by the variation, and what is the function of said protein? Well, one protein that is altered by variant RS375 is the PDE4D protein, or as I like to call it, the PDED protein. The PDED protein has a multitude of functions. One amongst them is its involvement in the processes that consolidate memory and learning. The cell type that expresses this the most are primarily the neurons, particularly in the glutamatergic neurons within the brain. According to scientists at Frontiers Genetics, the PDED variants must be the main reason for the abnormal topological properties and cognitive impairment.
While our SNP chip test can give information about your risks of Alzheimer's, it is important to understand what your results mean. The SNP chip test identifies specific alleles that are linked to higher risks of Alzheimer's, but it is not a conclusive test. Even if you have a high-risk allele, it does not guarantee that you will develop Alzheimer's. and not having a high risk allele present does not guarantee that you will not develop Alzheimer's. There are non-genetic factors that have a significant impact on your risks, the most significant of which is age. 90% of people who develop Alzheimer's do so after the age of 65, with risks increasing for every few years after that. Additionally, there is no known cure for Alzheimer's, and the known prevention measures that you can take, identified by the Alzheimer's Association, are recommended regardless of your results on this test. Exercise, a healthy diet, avoiding smoking decrease your risk regardless of your genetic predisposition to Alzheimer's. Additionally, they decrease risk of many other diseases. Our test can be useful for analyzing your risk of Alzheimer's and preparing for developing it in later life. However, it should not lead to a major lifestyle change for someone who is already leading a healthy life.